welcome to Juliet and Lucy's Quiet Leadership Revolution, the podcast for senior and aspiring leaders who want to make their voice heard and their impact felt through thoughtful, reflective, confident leadership. People who want to lead by example, bringing others with them, and who are ready to learn and adapt to deliver brilliant results. I'm Juliet Corbett.
And I'm Lucy Gower. And today we're going to be talking about preparing for difficult conversations. So before we started this recording, Juliet and I were scratching our heads a little bit about what would be the most helpful way to approach this, because this topic is big. And as we spoke, it kind of unraveled. But we're going to hone it in on perhaps a scenario where you as a leader need to give some sort of feedback to perhaps someone in your team, perhaps a colleague, and kind of our thoughts about the process that you might go through and some of the things that you might need to think about in preparing for that difficult conversation. Juliet, have you got anything to add to that in terms of where we're going to focus?
Two things come to mind. Firstly, you can adapt what we're going to say to all sorts of other difficult conversations. It's interesting, isn't it? We define them as difficult because they feel difficult, but actually what's difficult for one person might not be
exactly
difficult for another person. So I think we're going to take a fairly classic example that I know quite a few people we've worked with have had, where you've kind of feel that you need to address underperformance or something that's not quite right with someone that you've got in your team or one of your peers, your colleagues. But yeah, just keep in mind that this is going to be also applicable to lots of other things that feel difficult, which involve other people. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So for Juliet and I, when we were talking about this, the first kind of step is just noticing that there is something that it might be that somebody is not performing, that their behavior is not what you would expect from how somebody in your team would behave. You know, if we take the example of somebody being late on a regular basis is quite I appreciate that's quite a generic example, but we can play with that. It's just noticing that is happening in the first place and not pushing it under the carpet, because most of us, broad generalization here, kind of shy away from confrontation or something that is a difficult conversation to have. And I'm working on that assumption. If you're like, oh, I love difficult conversations, I have them all the time, don't listen to this. It's not going to help you. Go and listen to one of our other podcasts.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think it's that noticing. It's so easy, isn't it? Either because we're really busy, we just don't notice the pattern. Like there might be a pattern of behavior that is undermining others or is unhelpful, and the first thing is to have really open eyes to seeing it. And then when you see it, it's often, you can say, oh, that was just a one-off, or it's going to get better, or I'll just drop a hint and it'll be fine. And we kind of shy away, we resist allowing that noticing to really go deep enough for it to then become a thought process of, I need to do something about this.
And pretty much in my experience, it doesn't just go away, it continues, or it perhaps even gets worse. And I think the thing within that is that if you are managing a team and somebody is, for example, late all the time and everyone else is on time, then that starts to become an issue for everybody, because it's like, well, how come that person, it's okay that they're late and nothing's happening, but for the rest of us, we have to operate in a particular way. And there's something really key in that about fairness. It's not fair that somebody can get away with that behavior, or sometimes what happens, the rest of the team step up to kind of mask it, which perhaps if that's perfectly acceptable if there's an incident that has happened and the team need to pull together. But if it's a perpetual behavior that somebody just doesn't get in on time, that's not okay, and it starts to cause ripples within the team. Absolutely. If you don't address it.
So the other example that comes to mind, which has exactly the same impact, is team meetings where you're expecting the team to kind of feedback on what they've done and what they haven't done, and there's one person that's never completed the actions that they set themselves last meeting, and allowing that just to pass by because you're a bit nervous to confront it in the meeting itself. But it's noticing, that's 3 weeks in a row that person hasn't completed what they want to do, and it's public enough that others can see that as a leader I'm not picking up on that. And it's walking out of that meeting thinking, I need to do something about this.
Yeah, because it might not be appropriate to pull it up in the
Precisely.
meeting, but if there's not a one-to-one conversation about what's going on for
Yeah,
you, why are you not reaching your targets, why are you not doing what's been asked, how can I help and support you, then you're not doing the best for you as a leader, for them as the person that might be
yeah,
struggling, and for the rest of the team that's looking on with like raised eyebrows thinking, well, maybe I'll not
yeah,
bother next
exactly,
month
exactly.
either.
So the first thing is
Yeah.
noticing, and then the next thing, there's a thought process, isn't there, that then occurs next, which is
Mm,
what's going on. I'm making assumptions about what I think I'm seeing. So I'm seeing behavior, and I'm then making assumptions about what's behind that behavior, what's driving it.
yeah.
Is there an intention behind that behavior? Is it actually kind of disruptive behavior with an intention to disrupt? That can happen. What's
Yeah.
more frequent, from what I've seen, is that the intention
Mm,
is fairly benign. It's just that the behavior does disrupt the team. Um, so there's
mm.
something here about checking your assumptions, isn't there, about what's going on?
Yeah. Like, am I assuming that Nigel is always late because Nigel's lazy? Or that could be an
Yeah,
assumption that I make. But actually, if I don't know what's going on for Nigel, maybe the train times got changed and it means that he's either going to be half an hour
yeah,
early or 10 minutes late. So he's decided to be 10 minutes late, but actually hasn't told me. There's could be a
yeah,
negotiation um, around that. So we all make, I think we all make assumptions about everything all the time. That's how our brains work. That's not a judgment on that. But in this context, it's helpful to go, what assumptions am I making about this person's behavior? The person that doesn't do their reporting and in the team meeting says, oh, I haven't done it. Um, you could assume that they're just a bit
mm,
bold to say that, because I wouldn't be bold enough to have
hmm,
not done the thing in the meeting. Other people in the room could have different assumptions. Um, you might assume that they're lazy or they're disruptive, but actually maybe they're really struggling and they're just not bold enough to say, I'm really struggling, I need a bit of help here. So just sense checking
yeah,
those assumptions stops you like potentially steaming in like a bull in a
yeah,
china shop.
absolutely. And to recognize, well, the only way we can live our life is by making assumptions, because otherwise we can't compute all the
Yeah,
data that's coming into us all the time. Um, and that a
exactly.
lot of us with reflection might notice that there are patterns in the assumptions that we make, and often but not always it's assuming that others are like us. And so really consciously
Yeah,
thinking through, what assumptions might I be making here, and then, are they true? What else could be true that I haven't thought of from their perspective,
yeah,
that lens that they can,
yeah,
you can put on their shoes and look at it from
yeah,
that point of view as well. Yeah,
yeah. So it could be helpful if thinking, if I was this person, what would be going on for me
yeah,
here? And the more you know about your team and what makes them tick, the more you're able to make assumptions that may be closer to the truth rather than the assumptions which are your lens on how you
yeah,
see the world. And one of our all of our biggest defaults is assuming that other people see the world in the same way that you do. We've all got our
yeah,
own unique lens, which is fascinating, and can also make
yeah,
relationships really
yeah,
complex.
absolutely. So you've noticed this behavior, you've done a little bit of a mental conscious check in, what assumptions might I be making, what else might be true. um, and then
Yeah.
there comes to a point, doesn't there, where you've got to make a decision, and depending on the scale of the behavior that you're observing, you're either making that decision on your own or potentially talking to others, peers at your level, about what you're going to do about a particular situation.
Mm.
um, and this is where the fear sets in sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah, because we go, oh, I don't want to have what I think might be a
Yeah,
difficult conversation. So I'll just wait and see if it goes away, or pretend it's not happening, or, oh, it's okay that that person doesn't do their report. It doesn't, the reports don't matter. The milestones every quarter,
yeah,
that's what matters. And you can really easily convince yourself that it's not important. And if you have a tendency to do that, I really urge you to not just think about what's important to you, but to think about the ripple
yeah,
effect that it has on the team. And actually, your behavior is then starting to signal that that's okay, that that doesn't happen. In this case, the
yeah,
report doesn't happen. And what does that signal to
yeah,
other people about what's expected of them, but also the accountability of your own leadership, I think.
Yeah, it's what does it say about you, but not in a kind of a, I am the mighty leader and I can't let people, walk all over me. It's much more about what does it say about the culture that I'm creating
Yeah.
as a leader,
Yeah.
and my approach
Yeah.
to leadership and to curating that culture. And accountability is a key part of any effective culture, is the ability to make sure
Yeah.
that things are happening as they need to happen. I think as
Yeah.
well, as you're making that decision, again, depending on the scale of the behavior that you've been observing, it can be really useful at this point just to run it by someone else confidentially. So whether that's another leader at the
Yeah.
same level as you within your organization, just confidentially having a quiet word saying, I've got this situation, I just want to talk it through, whether that's your manager, whether
Mm.
that's your coach, a trusted person beyond work, so long as you're really clear that
Yeah.
there's appropriate levels of confidentiality, and you can always anonymize as appropriate. But I
Yeah.
think at this point, if you're really not sure, or you wonder whether the fear is stopping you from taking action,
Yeah.
it can be really useful kind of to have that sounding board.
Oh, yeah, I use you as a sounding board all the time.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
vice versa.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and actually you always have a slightly different lens to me, not surprisingly, and you often ask some really great coaching questions that makes me think in a different
Yeah, you're
perspective.
very
So
welcome.
thanks for
You're very
that.
welcome. And likewise when it is reversed. And I think it's that ability to, and even just saying it out loud sometimes, even if all the person
Oh
does is just
yeah.
listen with real kind of loving attention, and they have no idea what you're talking about. um, but just saying it out loud can actually be quite beneficial.
There was something recently where I didn't want to have a difficult conversation because I'm all about collaboration and consensus. A difficult conversation for me personally, I feel like it is really difficult. Anyway, I said the situation out loud to a trusted person. I won't share exactly what it is here. And I kind of got to the end of it and I went, oh, that's really appalling behavior, isn't it? I've really got to deal with that urgently. And they were like, mm-hmm. And it's like, thank
Yeah,
you. and
yeah,
off I went. But it can be really easy in your own echo chamber to be like, oh no, I'll just sit on that a little bit longer. I won't address it. And I'm talking very
yeah,
personally here about my own kind of um default. So I have to really push
yeah.
myself to have those
And
difficult
there is something,
conversations.
so that person who was listening to you, because you had their attention, it might sound strange, but it did matter that they were a human who was listening to you. In the sense that if you have the same
Yeah,
conversation with the kettle, which might be helpful to say it out loud to the kettle, but there's
yeah,
something about knowing that someone's got your back. They're really intently, they've got all the love in the world for you, in the sense they want the best outcome for you. There's
yeah,
something powerful about that, being a human that you're
yeah.
communicating with, even if they don't do anything.
Yeah, the accountability. I mean, I talk to my dog Gary all the time, but he doesn't hold me accountable in the same way that a human being
I'll
would.
offer the accountability that Gary can't. That's fine, no problem at all.
Thank you.
So,
What's next? What's next? So say we've decided, right, we need to lean into the fear and have this conversation.
I
What's
reckon it's
what's
something around the
next?
logistics, isn't it? Which is probably the thing that most people default to. It needs to be considered, but it's not the whole picture. Um, so it's that sense of,
Hmm.
where are you going to have the conversation? When are you going to have the conversation? How are you going to tell the
Mm,
person that you want to have the conversation? Um, and there's no right or wrong about any of this. Sometimes dropping it into a
mm.
conversation around the kettle might, I'm talking about kettles a lot today. Obviously need a cup of tea.
You
Might be
are.
the way to, I think it's a coffee deficit for today. That might be the way to do it. If it's really something small and you're kind of nipping something in the bud, actually that could be completely
Yeah,
appropriate to have that, just drop something
yeah,
into a conversation. Often, if it's something where you've framed it as a difficult conversation, that would imply it's something a little bit more significant. And so having the appropriate level of formality around it is really important, just to consider how
yeah,
they're going to take it and how they're going to get the best from them.
yeah. And and I think that's the bit, isn't it? It's about what's best for
Yes.
them with the message that with the conversation that you want to have, not what's best
Oh,
for
100%.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. And normally that's not going to be sitting in your office across a desk. It might be that
Yeah,
you need that formality, but it might also
yeah,
be that there's another quiet confidential space where you could sit a little bit more in an armchair next, like facing each other, but without a massive, powerful
Yeah.
desk between you. It's just
Yeah.
curating that to make them, to get the best from them, and to enable them
Yeah.
to hear what it is that you're going to be delivering to them, the message you're going to deliver to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Without feeling like we're over egging, like if anyone's listening going, well, like Nigel was only late 3 times. My goodness, with all this prep. But, that's just an
Yeah.
example. And one of the things that I do at this point is I think about, I've tried to put myself in their shoes. I think about all the objections, all the things that somebody might come up with as to why that behavior is okay. Because often people can be defensive as their first kind of point of call. And sometimes I can have a bit of a play with all the objections. I think about all the worst
Mm,
things that could possibly happen and then what I would say and how I would behave, which is partly getting myself into their shoes again and partly taking the fear out for me. If I've thought of all the worst case scenarios, when I impart the news and they say, "Oh, my train gets in late, can I shift my working hours or do you need me to get
mhm.
in early?" That feels like a walk in the park compared to what I've built it up to be in my
Yeah.
head as this like really difficult, fractious
Yeah.
conversation, which is entirely my lens.
There's a balance, isn't there? I would never recommend anybody to catastrophize. We're not talking about overthinking this at 3 a.m. in the morning,
No.
but there is a certain level of thought that can go in, playing around with the different kind of objections they can have, the different assumptions that they're making, the different outcomes
Yeah.
that could be acceptable to you. And I think, generally speaking, going in knowing what your ideal outcome is a great idea, but being super flexible, that you
Yeah.
don't, it's not about
Yeah.
getting to the outcome, it's about having a productive conversation, and eventually you'll get to an
Yeah.
outcome, which is what is required in that situation.
Yeah.
Which, let's be honest, might
Agreed.
be that someone is no longer part of your organization. I mean, that's the kind of the big difficult
Mhm.
conversation. And actually then thinking through, okay, well, if that's the ideal outcome because it's just not the right fit, there are all sorts of other mini
Mhm.
ideal outcomes around the way in which that information is delivered, the way in which that conversation, the iterative process you go through, is actually curated by
Yeah.
you as the leader.
Agree. I'm feeling for Nigel now. Like his train timetables changed, and now he's leaving. He's leaving the
I've
organisation.
upped the ante here a little bit, Lucy, because there
Yeah, you
might be people
have.
listening who are thinking, well, dealing with Nigel who's late is pretty straightforward. You should hear what I've got to deal with. And
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
this is the other thing, isn't it? If we're labeling it a difficult conversation, we're almost inherently labeling it as, I have to struggle because this is a difficult conversation. Um, and actually
mm,
taking away some of that pressure. Like, you are just two human beings who are going to sit down and have a chat. There might be some high stakes
yeah,
involved, and it's worth thinking about the things we're talking about. But at the end of the day, let's not over egg the pudding as well.
yeah. Maybe they're not difficult conversations. Maybe they're courageous conversations.
Yeah,
Maybe they're clear conversations. Because I think that's kind of the next
yeah.
bit that I want to
Tell us, Lucy, what's
think
next?
about is what's. It's not as linear as this.
Yeah,
I really would like it to be a flow chart, but it's not. So there's the 30 minutes before where you are, I'd suggest that you kind of do some breathing, get yourself calm. You don't want to be coming from one meeting holding on to all the stuff in that
yeah,
previous meeting to have a meeting that's important for the other person for it to land in the best
yeah,
way possible. So having a little bit of flex so that you're not going from one thing to another, where you can just breathe, relax, get your head right into, this is the outcome that I want, this is how I want this conversation to
yeah,
go. Let me really pay attention to the importance of getting this as delivering this as best as I possibly can for the other
yeah,
person. So there's that kind of 30-minute, I say 30
yeah.
minutes as sort of an arbitrary amount of time,
Yeah, I think
but
it, for me, it feels like 30
you
minutes
want to
before
get
the
it
meeting,
right.
they're kind of like, oh my goodness, we're actually doing this. Yeah, and there's kind of the physiology of it all, isn't there? Kind of the breathing, the placing your feet firmly on the ground and feeling the ground, and kind of body posture, kind of nice and straight, and opening your shoulders. There's all that stuff. And there's also like
Yeah.
calming your
All the
mind.
confidence
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's calming your mind too. It's sort of preparing to be fully present in the conversation that you're going to walk into, because with all of this planning,
Yeah.
you've anticipated objections, you've thought through assumptions that they might be making, that you might be making, you've thought through the specific examples that you're going to bring to the meeting to make it really concrete, so it's not too woolly, it's got a real kind of specific sense to it.
Mm,
You've done all of that, but at the end of the day, you don't want too much clutter in your mind. You want to be
mm,
present in the moment that you're about to step into. So whatever that means to you, you know, a
mm,
3-minute meditation, just making sure you've written a to-do list with all the things you've got to do later is, you know, on a post-it on your desk, so you can just
yeah,
clear all the other clutter out of your mind, so you can be try and
yeah,
be present.
yeah. Agreed. Then what about the actual, you know, me and Nigel were sat in our armchairs at like 45-degree angles to each other. We're all fully focused. Don't know where I got armchairs from. I don't know who has armchairs in their office. What does that conversation look like?
So I think so. So there's the preparation you've done. So there's being really clear. You don't want to be so kind of fluffy and you're trying to be so nice that actually the message doesn't get through. So there's something about compassionate
Yeah,
clarity, being really clear but delivering it in the way that has kind of the best intention for the other person to hear it. But there's also, you're there to listen. Yes, you're delivering some information. You're delivering to them information about the behavior, the situation, the impact they've had. But you need to listen to understand their assumptions, their point of view. Like, if you can listen to understand their view of the world, you're going to get to a shared desirable outcome much, much faster.
yeah, yeah. So it's being really specific about the behavior, what you've noticed, what you would like to change, what their view is on it, and just like zipping up and sitting back and letting them respond. Also being aware that if it's something that they are unaware of, or it's coming as like a negative bit of feedback, they might need a minute, they might need to come back in 10
Yeah,
minutes. They likely have an emotional response to it, and they might need to go and just have a think, and allowing that bit of time and
yeah,
space. But there's something about just delivering it really clearly without any fluff or waffle. I know that years ago I was made redundant from a role, and actually the person giving me that feedback, like the stuff that we've talked about making the decision, spotting the behavior, they had no control over what was happening. They were like the messenger. So I'd say, if that's you, don't use any of those phrases like, I'm just the messenger. Don't
mm,
like take responsibility for the message that you are tasked with delivering. But one of the things about that redundancy process that was difficult was that the person that was delivering that message to me was crystal clear. There was no like gray area of, oh, you know, maybe it'll be all right. It's like, your job will end on this date, and these are the options, and this is the way that I can support you. And throughout that whole process that was awful, I really appreciated
yeah,
that.
yeah.
They did a very good job of that difficult, courageous, brave, bold, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah,
conversation.
I mean, courageous conversation. I think I'm not going to go back and rename the episode, but I reckon that's what it is. It's a courageous conversation. Um, Yeah, and it
Mm,
is the clarity, because people will hear selectively. All of us delete, distort, and
mm,
generalize the information that comes into us all the time. It's the way that we work as humans. And
mm,
so the clearer you can be, the less there will be a distortion or a selective remembering and hearing of the message. And as you said
mm,
there are certain things that can be controlled and certain things that can't be controlled. And also being clear about what that is, and giving false hope. Oh my word, there's nothing worse than giving someone fake hope. If there isn't, you know,
mm.
any alternative outcome, don't imply that there might be. um
Yes, because if you're giving someone false hope, that's all about making you feel better about the situation. It's not about doing what's in their best
exactly.
interest. So I suppose that's a kind of guiding principle. What's best for
Yeah,
them? How can you impart this information in the clearest and most compassionate way you can? No fluff, but like don't like
yeah,
gloss around the edges. Tell
yeah,
it how it is.
absolutely. And it's what's best for them, but it's also going to get to the outcome that you need as an organization, because what's best for them might be that they can
Yeah.
continue being late and not doing their report and never doing any actions. That's clearly not going to be what's best for the organization. So It's the end result needs to be something that's going to serve the organization's vision. And we talked last time about the importance of having
Mm,
that big vision that you're inspiring everybody to deliver. And at the same
mm,
time, the method by which you do it, you can make it as easy for someone as possible. And hopefully,
yeah,
what we're looking for is behavior change. So you want to make them feel
yeah,
empowered to make that behavior change.
yeah.
Mm.
And I think if that's not possible, like it wouldn't have been the first time that I have had coaching clients where my brief is to help them figure out what their next thing is because the fit here isn't
Yeah,
right. And that's not like this person's awful, they have to leave. This is what they need and want and what the organization needs and wants are two
yeah,
different things. So how can we do our very best to find them something that is going to work so we can replace that role with the
yeah,
right set of skills, experience, and attitude, and it's better for
yeah.
everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. People often ask that, don't they, about coaching, especially where the coaching is paid for by the organization. But it's about finding what's best for the organization. And sometimes that means helping someone move on and helping them to understand
Yeah,
where they would have a more fulfilling career and work day. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
So where have we got to with this conversation with
So I
our
reckon you're sitting on the
pretend
sofa with
person?
Nigel, and or maybe armchairs rather than sofa.
Yeah,
And I'm gunning to fire
yeah.
him from the side room by the sound by the sound of it.
Are you behind a mirror like an interview room, like in
No.
police
Uh, as
dramas?
you're
Or
listening, we do not recommend one-way mirrors in these conversations. No. Um, no, so I think where we are is that the meeting itself, we are listening to understand and we are
Yeah.
communicating
And
with
it might be that
clarity.
we can reach a conclusion within that same sat in our armchairs, or it might be that we go away and reconvene because there's something important about how um, we don't want the person responding from an emotional space. Want them, they might need to go away and have a little
Yeah.
bit of a think, and then we can continue that conversation. It might not all be
Yeah,
in
absolutely.
one sitting, and it's your job to give them that space that they can do that.
Yeah, and I would probably say in the vast majority of cases where you're looking for a behavior change from somebody, you're never going to achieve that in one meeting. That's overly ambitious. So it's going to
Yeah.
be an iterative process. And I think as the leader, if you leave that meeting better understanding their view of the world, that means that the next
Hmm.
iteration of that process, you're going to be able to communicate it what you need and help and support them in that behavior change process more effectively because you as a leader are leaving that room with much greater understanding of what's driving the behavior and the situation and the way that the other person sees and makes assumptions about the situation. So that's the goal, actually, isn't it? The goal is probably not to get to the desired outcome in one meeting. It's to leave the meeting, both of you having greater clarity of the other.
Absolutely. And on that, I think again depends a little bit on the context. And you know, if it's something that requires an HR
Mm,
representative for that difficult conversation, then they should be there. Nigel being late for his train doesn't require
yeah,
HR, in my opinion, but it can be helpful to follow up with
yeah,
something in writing so that there's a paper trail and an agreed um outcomes, whatever that might be. It might be that we're going to reconvene on this
yeah,
date and this time, and this is where we got to. This is what we discussed. I think that it is helpful to put that down
yeah,
as a paper trail, so you've both got the
yeah.
same written record and shared
And it
understanding.
gives them a chance to come back with anything that had been misinterpreted or misunderstood, which happens as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
Yeah,
always, because we're people with our own unique lens
yeah,
on the
exactly.
world.
So, as we think about this conversation, Lucy, what are the key things that you want people to take away from our conversation today around courageous conversations, as I have now unilaterally renamed it?
I think it's about giving clear, concise information to the other person. It's not about what you need, it's what
Mhm.
they need in order to be able to res- respond to where you've got to. I think from an individual perspective, we can really, it's easy to shy away from what we feel might be a difficult or courageous conversation. Most of the time, we build it up in our head to be much more frightening than it actually is. So it's about this is my phrase of the day, leaning into the fear, get it done. That not just for you and the other person, but for the whole team. Don't underestimate the impact that somebody that isn't performing has on the rest of the team. Those are my 3. What's yours?
So I think there's the self-management that's required. So there's the self-understanding and the self-reflection, and being able to understand yourself as a leader. The more you can
Yeah.
understand yourself, and that you give yourself permission to feel whatever you feel at different stages, and then simultaneously understand that action maybe will be needed, and so leaning into that fear. I think that a lot of this is based on self-awareness, actually. So yes, it's about putting them at the center, but it is
Mm,
about self-awareness as a leader. I
mm.
think that combination then of clarity of communication is really critical. And I think all of us can probably think of examples where we've walked out of a meeting and thought, what what are they saying? Like, I don't even understand what they've just said to me, let alone what
Yeah.
behavior I'm supposed to be shifting as a result of that conversation. So real
Yeah.
clarity, real clarity. And I think the third one, listening to understand. I think actually
Mm,
the probably the best advice that I've received on this was that the goal is to walk out of that meeting understanding the other person better. So let's not overcomplicate it. All this other stuff we've talked about is
yeah.
all important, and there'll be little things in here that will speak to different people as they're listening, depending on the situations they're kind of navigating at the moment. But at the end of the day, if you can go into that meeting thinking, my goal is to walk out understanding this person better, this other person better,
Mm,
then that's going to take you in good places. That's really going to help. Yeah.
I agree.
Fantastic. I feel like there might be multiple episodes on variations of this
Mm,
theme, because as you said at the beginning, Lucy, this is such a big area, and it's a combination of emotion and self-awareness as well as communication skills and so on, that I think there might be other examples, other areas, assets, facets to this discussion that we could address.
yeah.
So if you're listening to this and you're thinking,
Yeah,
yes,
I
but
agree.
what about dot dot dot, that's what you need to email to us. That's what you need to tell us
Tell
about,
us.
because that's what
Yeah.
we can cover in a future episode. And yeah, good luck with your courageous conversations going forwards. So thank you for spending this time with us today. Don't forget that if we want to make our voice heard and our impact felt, then we need to gift ourselves the space to think, the courage to lead, and the confidence to adapt. I'm Juliet Corbett.
And I'm Lucy Gower. We hope you'll join us next time for the Quiet Leadership Revolution.